Have you ever walked away from a conversation that seemed perfectly polite, even kind, and yet you felt strangely hollow inside? They didn't insult you, didn't raise their voice, didn't throw a single harsh word your way. On the contrary, they smiled, they complimented you, they spoke with the softness of a trusted friend. And still, as the door closed behind you, you carried a heaviness in your chest, as if something inside you had been quietly stolen. It's like walking into a room filled with the fragrance of fresh flowers, only to step outside and realize your lungs are thick with smoke. You breathe in beauty, but you exhale confusion. You don't know why, but suddenly, your own confidence feels brittle, and the ground beneath your feet no longer feels as steady as it did an hour ago. Maybe you've met someone like this. Maybe you know exactly the type of person I'm describing, though you've never found the words to explain it. Who are they? Are they a friend? A family member? A colleague? Or are they something else entirely, an enemy cloaked in gentleness, a dark heart concealed beneath the mask of concern? What you've encountered isn't imagination. It isn't your fault for being too sensitive. It's a subtle poison carried in the form of kindness. And if you don't recognize it, it seeps slowly into your mind, until you can't tell whether the unease you feel is a warning or a weakness within yourself. The truth is, some people don't harm you with aggression, they harm you with warmth. They don't destroy your peace with shouts or insults. They dismantle it quietly, with carefully chosen words that plant doubt, with smiles that make you question your worth, with helpful advice that seems innocent, but slowly convinces you that you're not enough without them. And that is what makes them so dangerous. Stoicism teaches us that life is full of tests, not always the obvious ones. Not just war, loss, or great tragedy. Sometimes the greatest tests come wrapped in politeness, in gentle tones, in the people who stand closest to us but drain the most from us. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to expect treachery not from strangers, but from those he would meet every single day. Flatterers, manipulators, and those who disguise control as care. Think about it. How many times have you smiled through a conversation, nodded politely, even thanked someone only to lie awake that night, replaying their words, wondering why you felt so small? These are the unseen battles of the modern age, where power isn't taken by force, but eroded by subtle influence. And here is the truth you need to remember. Your peace of mind is not theirs to decide. Your worth is not theirs to define. No matter how gentle the disguise, no matter how soft the words, you do not have to accept every seed they plant in your mind. But here is the challenge. Without clarity, you will not see it happening. Without discipline, you will keep returning to conversations that weaken you. And without practice, you will confuse manipulation for love, control for care, sabotage for honesty, and emotional draining for connection. That's where Stoicism becomes more than philosophy. It becomes a shield. It becomes the silent armor you wear into these invisible wars, where the enemy is not anger or open hostility, but the slow erosion of your inner strength. Epictetus said it best: you cannot control what others say, but you can absolutely decide what enters your mind. This is why we must learn to see clearly, to guard ourselves not with aggression, but with awareness, not with bitterness but with boundaries. Because the real victory is not in defeating these people, it is in refusing to be diminished by them. So if you've ever left a conversation and felt the quiet ache of self-doubt pressing on your chest, if you've ever felt guilty for growing, or hesitant to shine, or weary from carrying someone else's endless darkness, then you already know this battlefield. And here, in true Stoic way, we walk it together. We give you the words to name what has been nameless, the clarity to recognize what was once hidden, and the strength to step through it without losing yourself. Stay with me, because what comes next will not only open your eyes to the faces behind the masks, but also show you how to keep your soul untouchable, no matter how subtle the attack. Not every enemy comes with a raised voice, a clenched fist, or a sharp insult. Some of the most dangerous people you will ever meet walk into your life with open arms, a soft tone, and words that drip with the sweetness of concern. They never shout, never accuse, never demand. Instead, they speak like a trusted friend, offering helpful advice, gentle corrections, or kind reminders of your supposed flaws. And in that very softness lies their power. These are the manipulators who wear the mask of friendship. On the surface, they appear to be your biggest supporter. They'll praise your talents in public, commend your efforts, and smile warmly when you succeed. But listen carefully, and you'll notice that every compliment comes with a shadow attached. Every time they raise you up, they slip in a small seed of doubt, a subtle question about your judgment, a quiet suggestion that maybe you're not quite ready yet, a soft whisper that without them, you might falter. It's like being offered a sweet-tasting medicine that numbs your tongue, but over time, weakens your entire body. At first, you welcome it because it feels like care. Eventually, you realize it's not curing you, it's quietly poisoning your strength. I once knew someone like this. In team meetings, he would speak highly of me, saying I had natural leadership qualities and fresh ideas. I felt grateful for his support. But later, I discovered that in private conversations with our boss, he would casually remark that I was a little impulsive, not always consistent, or in need of extra oversight. At the time, I thought it was constructive criticism. Only when I started being excluded from key projects did I realize what was happening. He wasn't building me up, he was keeping me beneath him. His strategy was brilliant in its cruelty. Convinced me that I needed his guidance, that I was only strong with his approval. This is the essence of the manipulator's game. They done to control you by force. They control you by making you believe you cannot stand without them. Stoicism has much to teach us here. Marcus Aurelius wrote that when dealing with people who seek to undermine us, the key is not rage but observation. Observe them, he would say, as if you were standing outside the play, watching the actors move across the stage. Do not give them the satisfaction of your anger, because anger is a reaction, and reaction is a kind of surrender. Instead, treat them as an exercise for your clarity, a training ground for your composure. Epictetus added his wisdom. You cannot control what others say, but you can absolutely decide what enters your mind. That is the shield we hold against manipulation. Their words may land at your door, but you choose whether or not to invite them inside. Think about it. How many times have you carried someone else's words with you long after the conversation ended? A comment about being too impulsive, not experienced enough, or not quite ready. These phrases sound harmless, even helpful, but they echo in your mind like a verdict. And the more you replay them, the more you adjust yourself, not to become stronger, but to become smaller, more convenient, more manageable for them. Here lies the danger. A manipulator doesn't need to win through action. They win through suggestion. Through planting just enough doubt that you begin to shape yourself according to their comfort, not your own growth. So what can you do? First, pay attention to the aftertaste of conversations. With true friends, you leave feeling lighter, stronger, encouraged. With manipulators, you leave feeling uncertain, guilty, or quietly diminished. Your emotions are the compass that reveals the truth. Second, practice the Stoic art of inner distance. Instead of swallowing their words whole, hold them in your hand like stones and examine them. Ask yourself, does this belong to me, or does it belong to them? If it belongs to them, let it fall. Finally, remind yourself daily, your worth is not up for negotiation. It is not defined by any single voice, especially not by those who thrive on keeping you beneath them. And here's the paradox. Manipulators often believe they are helping. They cloak their words in kindness because they want you to depend on their wisdom. They need you to need them. And the moment you see through that disguise, you take back the power they thought they owned. Marcus Aurelius faced this exact kind of subtle treachery in the Roman court. Advisors would flatter him while planting seeds of doubt about his generals, his decisions, or his reforms. Instead of reacting with fury, he wrote to himself in his journal, "These men test my reason. They remind me who I am and who I am not." He didn't waste energy trying to change them. He used them as a mirror to strengthen his own clarity. That's the lesson for us. Manipulators don't need your hatred or your outrage. They need you to doubt yourself. The greatest act of resistance is not to rage, but to refuse. Refuse to let their words define you. Refuse to let their doubts take root. Refuse to let their version of you replace your own. If you've ever walked away from someone who praised you with one hand, but subtly cut you down with the other, you already know this kind of pain. And maybe, for a time, you believed them. Maybe you lived smaller because of their words. But understand this, the moment you decide to reclaim your clarity, their power dissolves. Because a manipulator only has power over the blind. Once you see, their mask shatters. And that is why you must stay alert, not angry. Watch, but do not absorb. Hear, but do not obey. Remember that the only person with the right to define your worth is you. On this path, you are not alone. Here in true Stoic way, we walk together, learning to stand tall in the face of false praise, to see clearly through the sweetest lies, and to live by the only validation that matters, the one we give ourselves. If you've ever felt trapped by someone else's definition of you, this is your place to break free. Stay, listen, and strengthen your armor. Not all forms of affection are real. Some are disguised contracts, written in visible ink, where the unspoken agreement is this: I will stand by you, but only if you remain broken. This is the person who seems to be your closest ally when you are at your lowest. When your world collapses, they arrive with open arms. When you stumble, they rush to catch you. When you feel small, they become the shoulder you lean on. At first, it feels like devotion, like rare loyalty in a world of fleeting care. But watch what happens when you begin to rise. The moment you stand taller, when you regain direction, when you start to grow stronger and no longer need their constant rescue suddenly, their warmth cools. The same person who comforted you yesterday begins to look at you with distance, sometimes with sarcasm, sometimes with quiet resentment. Their presence shrinks as your strength expands. It's as if they were a crutch, useful only while you limped, but jealous when you learned how to walk again. I once had a friend like this. She was always there when I was down. When life was chaos, she was the first to check in. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" She would ask, her voice full of sympathy. For a while, I believed she was my anchor. But then I began to change. I started cleaning up my life, exercising, setting boundaries, finding focus. That's when her messages turned into something different. "You've changed so much. Must be hanging around new people now, huh? Forgot about the old ones." It wasn't joy she felt for me, it was loss. Loss of her power, her role in my story. She only valued me when I was fragile, because that's when she could feel needed. And when I no longer depended on her, she saw my growth not as progress, but as betrayal. This is the cruelty of conditional affection. It's not really about you, it's about them. About the role they want to play, the image they want to maintain. They are not loyal to your soul, they are loyal to your weakness. Seneca understood this pattern well. He warned that not every companion deserves the name of friend, and not every voice that offers comfort deserves your trust. Do not hate them, he said, but see them as a test of your steadiness. Their role in your life is not to be resented, but to be recognized, for they reveal the difference between love that is real and love that is conditional. Stoicism reminds us that genuine connection uplifts without chains. Real love is not threatened by your strength. A true friend rejoices when you become more than you were yesterday. The false friend recoils, because your independence means the end of their importance. Ask yourself, who stands beside you when you rise? Who encourages your growth, even if it means you outgrow them? Those are the ones who truly love you. And who grows distant, or bitter, or sarcastic, once you no longer need saving? Those are the ones who only love the version of you that was broken. This kind of person is easy to mistake for a savior. When you're vulnerable, their care feels like oxygen. But with time, you see the truth. They are not there for you. They are there for the power they feel in being needed. And once you've healed, that power fades. You don't owe them your weakness. You don't owe them the smaller version of yourself, just so they can feel secure. There is a quiet kind of guilt that rises in situations like this. You begin to wonder, am I abandoning them? Am I being selfish for outgrowing the place where they met me? But listen closely, growth is not betrayal. Strength is not ingratitude, and becoming more than you once were is not a crime. Your life is not meant to be an endless apology for healing. Remember, you are not responsible for shrinking just so others can remain comfortable. Stoicism teaches us that our path must be walked with integrity, not with chains of obligation. If someone resents your progress, let that resentment belong to them. Do not carry it. Picture it like climbing a mountain. Some people are happy to hike beside you as long as you both stay near the bottom. But once you begin the steep ascent, they complain about the climb. They tug at your arm, begging you to stop, to rest, to go back. And if you keep going, they may even sit down, letting you walk on alone. The lesson is clear. Not everyone is meant to reach the summit with you. So if you've ever felt guilty for becoming stronger, guilty for no longer needing the same rescue, guilty because someone close to you sighs and says, "You're not the same anymore," know this: it is not you who failed them. It is they who failed to celebrate your growth. And in that moment, your choice becomes simple. Keep growing, keep climbing, keep becoming. Because a life lived in chains to someone else's need for your weakness is no life at all. If you've ever been made to feel guilty for your own strength, remember this. True Stoic way exists to remind you that you never need permission to grow. You never have to apologize for standing taller. And you never owe anyone the prison of your stagnation. Here, we walk together toward freedom, the kind that only comes when you refuse to shrink. Not every prison is built of stone and iron. Some are made of soft words, of sighs heavy with concern, of questions asked in the name of love. No doors slam shut, no locks are turned. And yet, over time, you find that your life has grown smaller, your choices fewer, your freedom quietly dissolved. This is the control of the overconcerned, the one who doesn't demand obedience but cloaks it in the language of care. They never shout, they rarely forbid. Instead, they lean close and say, "I just don't feel right when you spend time with that person." Or, "Do you really think you should wear that? People might talk." Or, "I only worry you're working so far from home. What if someone takes advantage of you?" It sounds gentle, it sounds protective. But if you pay attention, you'll see the pattern. Every word is a leash. Every sigh is a shackle. Slowly, without realizing it, you begin to shape your life to keep them calm, not to keep yourself free. I once heard the story of a woman married for 2 decades. Her husband never shouted, never lifted a hand, never made demands. Instead, he wrapped every command in worry. "I just don't think that friend is good for you. Do you really need to spend time away from me? I'm only worried something might happen if you go." She wanted to believe it was love. But year by year, she gave up more of herself. She stopped seeing old friends, stopped pursuing her hobbies, stopped spending time alone. Until one day she realized she was living in what she described as a glass cage. A prison invisible to the outside world, but unbreakable all the same. This is what Stoics warn us about: captivity disguised as devotion. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Freedom is not only the breaking of chains, it is the refusal to let your mind be ruled by another." How profound that truth becomes here. The worst form of bondage is not the chain on your wrist, but the guilt tied around your heart. Because that is how controllers bind you, with guilt. You want an evening to yourself, they look sad. You reconnect with an old friend, they go cold. You say no to a request, they withdraw, leaving you drowning in the weight of their disappointment. They don't forbid. They condition. They don't command. They manipulate through silence and sorrow. And without clarity, you confuse this for love. You tell yourself, they only want what's best for me. But love that requires you to shrink is not love, it is control dressed in tenderness. Ask yourself, do you make choices freely? Or do you pause, calculating how someone else will react before you even act? Do you say yes not because you want to, but because you fear their sadness if you refuse? If so, then you are not living your life, you are living theirs. And here is the brutal truth. Genuine love does not hold you hostage. Real care does not require you to be smaller. True affection does not demand that you sacrifice your growth to protect another person's comfort. Love, in its purest form, is freedom. It is the joy of knowing that you can go out into the world, become stronger, and still choose to return, not because you're chained, but because you want to. The Stoic approach is not to rebel with anger, nor to sever bonds with violence. Instead, it is to draw the quiet but unshakable line. To say calmly, I appreciate your concern, but this decision is mine. I will take responsibility for it. That is the posture of freedom. Not explosive, not defensive, just clear. Because clarity itself is strength. When you claim responsibility for your choices, you break the invisible chains. You reclaim the right to live as your nature directs, not as someone else's fear dictates. And yes, the cost may be discomfort. They may sulk, they may frown, they may call you selfish. But ask yourself, is it selfish to protect the space in which your soul breathes? Or is it necessary? Epictetus reminds us, if something demands that you sacrifice your peace of mind, no matter what it is called, it is not worth it. Even if it is called love, even if it is wrapped in concern. So if you find yourself feeling guilty for simply wanting to live, if you find your world shrinking under the weight of someone's constant worry, remember this. Love is not supposed to be a glass cage. It is supposed to be the wind in your sails, not the anchor at your feet. And once you see the truth, the choice becomes clear to step beyond guilt, to breathe again, to reclaim the life that belongs only to you. Here in true Stoic way, we learn to set boundaries with calm strength, to recognize when care is really control, and to guard our inner freedom with unshakable clarity. No one holds the rope to your soul, no matter what name they give it. Not even if they call it love. Not every obstacle in your path shouts stop. Some whisper it softly, in the voice of a friend, a colleague, or a family member. They don't forbid you outright. They don't block your way with force. Instead, they sprinkle your journey with carefully measured words of concern, until the ground beneath your feet feels less certain, and the fire in your chest burns a little weaker. This is the saboteur who hides beneath the mask of care. They're often the ones closest to you, the people whose approval you once valued most. When you share your dreams, they listen quietly, nodding with a face of sympathy. And then, always with a sigh, always with just the right weight of reason, they remind you of the risks. The economy is rough right now. Maybe it's not the time to start your own business. Or, you're doing well already, why push yourself so hard and risk failing? On the surface, it sounds logical. It sounds responsible. But beneath the surface, it erodes your confidence. You don't walk away empowered. You walk away smaller, more hesitant, less willing to take the leap. It's like a ship anchored in shallow water. Above the surface, it looks free, floating gently, ready to sail. But beneath the waves, a hidden anchor drags in the sand, keeping the vessel from ever venturing into open sea. You don't notice it at first. You think you're choosing to stay in safe waters. Only later do you realize it wasn't your choice at all. I once knew someone like this. Each time I felt the spark of ambition, each time I wanted to step into something greater, he was the first to listen. And he always had advice gentle, calm, spoken as if he cared for my best interest. I just don't want to see you disappointed. It's a lot of stress, and you're already doing fine. Why make life harder for yourself? At first, I appreciated it. I told myself, he's looking out for me. But after years of hearing his words, I noticed a pattern. Every time I was on the edge of growth, his concern arrived. And each time I walked away with less clarity, less courage, less will to act. He never shouted, he never forbid. But he always left me doubting. That's the genius and the cruelty of the subtle saboteur. They don't break your spirit with blunt force. They erode it, grain by grain, until your dreams dissolve in the silence of hesitation. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The wise man does not need the approval of others to do what is right. He only needs to be sure he is not betraying his own nature." This is the antidote to sabotage disguised as realism. When someone cloaks their doubt in care, the question is not, do they mean well? But am I staying true to my nature? Because in the end, it doesn't matter whether their words come from jealousy, fear, or simple small-mindedness. What matters is whether you let those words become chains around your will. Here's the test. Pay attention to how you feel after sharing your dreams. Do you leave the conversation lighter, with greater resolve? Or do you leave hesitant, second-guessing yourself, shrinking from your own vision? If it's the latter, you've just encountered the saboteur. And once you see it clearly, you don't need to confront them with anger or expose their motives. You don't even need to prove them wrong. All you need to do is stop feeding them your most precious visions. Guard your dreams like fire in the wind. Share them only with those who shelter the flame, not with those who try to snuff it out under the guise of being realistic. The Stoic practice here is clarity. A mind clear as a polished mirror. When your mind reflects reality without distortion, you see who truly lifts you and who quietly holds you back. And once you see it, the spell is broken. Their words no longer lodge in your chest. They pass by like wind through an open window. So if you've ever found yourself hesitating after a friend's honest advice, if you've ever dimmed your own light, because someone suggested you might shine too brightly, understand this. Their concern is not your compass. Their fear is not your limit. The greatest tragedy is not that such people exist. It's that too often, we mistake their caution for wisdom and let it rule our steps. But the wise man, the Stoic, remembers, approval is optional. Integrity is not. If you want to live like a ship without anchors, daring to cut through the waves and venture into the vast unknown, then stay with true Stoic way. Here, we train the mind to be like a mirror, clear, steady, unshaken, so you can see who truly stands with you and who only holds you back. Some people don't insult you. They don't sabotage you. They don't control or manipulate. Instead, they drain you simply by existing in your orbit. Every time you meet them, every time their name flashes on your phone, you feel a quiet heaviness in your chest, as if you were about to step into a storm you've walked through 100 times before. These are the people who have built their identity around misery. There's always something wrong, always something to complain about, always a new pain, a new injustice, a new tragedy that only they seem to carry. And while at first your compassion rises, you listen, you comfort, you remind yourself that everyone suffers, you begin to notice something strange. Their story never changes. The details shift, the actors rotate, but the script remains the same. They don't want solutions. They don't want healing. They want an audience. It's like pouring water into a bottomless well. You keep giving, keep listening, keep offering encouragement, but no matter how much you pour in, it vanishes into emptiness. And worse, it drains you in the process. What begins as kindness turns into fatigue. What begins as support turns into dread. You find yourself avoiding calls, making excuses, praying for silence, because you know that every interaction will leave you emptier than before. I once had a friend like this. Whenever we spoke, the conversation always circled back to the same refrain. Nothing works out for me. Nobody cares. Life is unfair. At first, I listened with patience. I tried to lift him up, to offer perspective, to suggest small changes. But each suggestion was met with the same response. Easy for you to say. You don't understand. Over time, I realized he wasn't looking for light. He was looking for validation of his darkness. My presence wasn't helping him rise, it was enabling him to stay. That's when I understood. He didn't need a friend, he needed a witness to his suffering. And I had been drafted into that role without consent. Epictetus spoke directly to this truth. A loving soul is not the one who carries every burden. It is the one who knows which burdens to set down. Compassion is noble, but compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Because here is the lesson the Stoics knew well. Empathy is not martyrdom. To feel for someone does not mean you must bleed for them endlessly. To care does not mean you extinguish your own fire just to warm another. The energy drainer thrives on others who confuse compassion with servitude. They rely on your unwillingness to walk away. And as long as you keep showing up, they will keep rehearsing their same tragic lines. This doesn't mean you must become cold or indifferent. Stoicism never tells us to abandon love. What it tells us is that love without wisdom turns into slavery, and slavery of the soul is the greatest tragedy of all. So what do? You create distance not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. You recognize that if you are constantly depleted, then your presence ceases to be a gift. You say, gently but firmly, I cannot carry this with you today. And in that moment, you free not only yourself but also them from the endless cycle of validation that keeps them from truly seeking change. The truth is, you were not born to be the endless reservoir for another person's sorrow. Your soul is not a landfill for their pain. Your time, your energy, your spirit, all are finite, all are precious. If you waste them endlessly in one bottomless well, you deny the world the light you could have brought elsewhere. And that is perhaps the most important realization. Protecting your energy is not selfishness, it is stewardship. A fire must be kept alive if it is to give warmth. If you let yourself burn out, you have nothing left to offer, not to them, not to yourself, not to anyone. So if you find yourself trapped in relationships where your only role is to absorb someone else's misery, pause. Ask yourself, am I helping them heal, or am I only being chained by their pain? If the answer stings, let it sting. That pain is your signal. It is the moment of awakening. And from that moment, you step back not with bitterness, not with hostility, but with the clarity that your life is not meant to be drained dry by another's refusal to grow. If you are exhausted from relationships that never feel full, step into the journey with true Stoic way. Here, we learn how to give without emptying, to love without losing ourselves, to keep the flame burning bright even in the face of endless shadows. You were never meant to live as someone else's fuel. You were meant to shine. You've now seen the 5 faces of quiet destruction. The manipulator cloaked in kindness, the pretender who loves only your weakness, the controller who binds with guilt, the saboteur who buries your courage beneath concern, and the energy drainer who feeds on endless misery. None of them raise their voice, none of them strike with fists. And yet, their impact cuts just as deep, sometimes deeper, because it works in silence. But here is the truth the Stoics never tired of repeating. You do not need to change these people. You cannot reshape them, cannot redeem them, cannot force them to be different. That task does not belong to you. What belongs to you, what always belongs to you, is your response. Marcus Aurelius asked himself each morning to expect treachery, flattery, manipulation, selfishness. He did not ask the world to be otherwise. He asked himself to remain steady. And that is the same choice you face each day. To master not the hearts of others, but your own. You don't have to win against them. You don't have to expose them. You don't have to prove them wrong. Your only task is not to be pulled down by their weight. Their shadows cannot smother your light unless you kneel beneath them. This is the quiet victory of Stoicism. When you choose not to be shaken, you've already won. When you walk away from manipulation without anger, you've won. When you refuse to feel guilty for your strength, you've won. When you set boundaries calmly, when you keep your mind clear like a mirror, when you protect your flame from being drained, you have claimed the one victory that matters most, the victory over yourself. Peace is not given by the world. Peace is not handed to you by a friend, a partner, or a stranger. Peace begins where your reaction ends. It is found in the pause between what they do and how you choose to respond. Every time you hold your silence instead of lashing out, every time you step away without needing to explain, every time you draw a boundary without apology, you move closer to freedom. Each small act of restraint, Each conscious choice not to be dragged into someone else's storm becomes a declaration: you cannot control me. I belong to myself. So if you take only one lesson from this, let it be this: your life is not about defeating toxic people. It is about never allowing them to defeat you. They will always exist. But so will your power to stand unshaken. And when you live like this, when you let peace guide your steps, you become untouchable. Not because you live without pain, but because pain no longer rules you. Not because others stop their games, but because their games no longer reach your mind. If what you've heard here resonates with the truth you've quietly carried in your heart, don't leave in silence. Join True Stoic Way, a place where we don't just talk about Stoicism, but live it each day, together. A place where every man and woman learns to walk through darkness without fear, to face manipulation without anger, to guard their soul with calm strength. Because the world will never stop testing you, but here, you will never walk the path alone.